Mike, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I read with some interest what you published on your blog over the weekend. It says you can't handle
Okay.
the truth, but the bond market can. I thought it was a great article. Now, you know what? I think less people than we think fully understand bonds and how they work. And so I'm going to give a
Well, I certainly
1 minute
don't.
lesson. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to give. So a bond is an instrument that pays a fixed coupon. That is to say,
Right.
the rand amount or the whatever currency denominated amount is fixed. Okay.
Right.
And if you buy a bond for 100 and it pays 10, then it's issued at a 10% yield. Okay.
Right.
If, however, you start getting worried about things, you start selling the bond. Okay. And so the
Okay.
price goes down. And as a
Right.
consequence of the price going down, the yield goes up. So now you're suddenly getting 10 Rand on a 90 Rand purchase price of a bond. So that's how the yield goes up. The actual Rand amount stays the same. This is completely different to the equities market where the dividend can change and it's unknown. In the capital markets, the coupon is known and fixed for the term of the bond. So it is a very simple instrument in that sense. And it is influenced by interest rate expectations and general market confidence. And confidence not at a company level, but often at a country or institutional level, because these things aren't typically all issued in the equities market. So in the equities market, we have price earnings multiples, which tell you how we rate things. Here, it's really simple. The price goes up or down, and that impacts on the yield that you expect. And which one
Right.
drives which one, we don't really know. So when you buy a bond, the more expensive, the higher the yield, the higher the implied risk, right? Because the lower the price
Right.
that you've entered. Anyway, enough of the lessons. So the good news about the bond is it's not managed once it's issued. Okay, there's no one managing it. There's no executive in charge of strategic decisions of the external figures in the marketplace. Just tell it where it's going. And that's in
Right.
that sense, I thought your article was great because it tells the truth. It's unaffected by management utterances or issuer utterances. It's there. What were
Yes.
you trying to tell
So,
us, Tim?
so you would agree with me now, and you must tell the truth here, that
Of
the
course,
bond market tells the truth.
it does. Yeah, it.
Well,
I wouldn't
but
argue
so aren't there
it's one.
situations in which the bond market doesn't tell the truth? Haven't we
No,
had
it can't.
situations before where?
No, it can't. The bond market can
Okay.
be less informed than a
Right.
particular entity, but it can't lie because you can't make up the results. We know what the coupon is. It's a contractual obligation of the issuer. Okay, that doesn't
Right.
change through the life of the bond. We know when it's going to be redeemed. We know what
Right.
currency it's in and all of those good things. So the result is imposed on it by market forces, not by individuals or managers or people who've got a vested interest in it, if you will, because it's done and dusted. It's a capital market
So
instrument
why
that
why
behaves
why would
according
you
to the
say
environment.
we as ordinary people care about this stuff? I mean, why should
Well, we
we
care.
care?
Well, I invest in bonds, for example, because
Do
typically
you?
a
Okay.
bond. Yes, I do. Typically,
Okay.
bonds have a higher running yield
Right.
than you can get if you leave your money on deposit. Okay, for starters.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And they typically have a lower risk than equities, a lower risk in terms of volatility of share price. Okay, they don't,
Right.
they don't triple or double or halve anyway as easier as equities might because of the actual performance of the company, which is unknown all the time
Right.
until every
Exactly.
half year when the results come out. You know
Okay.
exactly how a bond's performing. So it's a safe haven in that sense, and it always yields a return. And the riskier it gets, the more it
Yes.
pays.
Okay, so the I'm glad we're on the same track here. I'm very
Yeah.
glad that somebody who knows more about this than I am is agreeing with me. I thank you for that. It's a unusual situation. You know
Most
much more about
portfolios,
this than me.
most investment portfolios would have a healthy dose of bonds. Probably 20 or
Yeah.
30% would be invested in bonds, as probably the highest yielding risk-adjusted instrument of interest in their portfolio. So that's what, in the
Okay.
old days we even used to have post office bonds, but let's not go
Okay.
there. There are boundaries
Yes,
to
yes,
this
yes, yes.
to this discussion, which
I
we
mean,
should perhaps
so
not
my
enter.
thesis, and maybe you should, you could also sort of comment on this too, is, the reason I wrote this was basically because if you look at what's happening in America at the moment, you might be tempted to think that actually things are going pretty well for Donald Trump.
Yeah,
First of all, the stock market is at a record. Secondly, the big, beautiful bill has been passed.
yeah,
Thirdly, his whole campaign on tariffs and so on doesn't seem to have affected inflation as much as people thought it was. So, the reason I did this was because of one simple fact. And the simple fact is this, that American interest rates are now higher than Greek interest rates. And I just thought that was just
okay,
extraordinary. And if the bond market is telling the truth, basically what it's telling us is that we should be cautious here about lauding Donald Trump's surprising performance as much as some people are. I don't think there's not a lot of
yeah.
people in South Africa
Well,
who are doing that, but there are a lot of people around in America who are doing that.
Well, there are two
So what do you
component
think?
parts to US bonds. One is the currency, and the other is the yield.
Right,
Okay, so
right,
if the currency is taking a hit, forget about the bond or whatever instrument you might be talking about. Then the value of those bonds, because they denominate in dollars, are going to go down. So the
right,
currency is going to take a hit. And I expect the currency is taking a hit because rather naively, in my naive view,
right,
America had the best of all worlds. They were trading at a deficit in goods that they couldn't produce cheaper. And in
right,
exchange for that, they were selling services which you couldn't buy more expensively. And then they had the
right,
reserve currency to back up the stuff that they paid for the stuff. It was nirvana,
right,
okay, until you
right,
sat back and wanted to focus on one element of that which you should never have in isolation. And so it's ruinous, the strategy, in my view, that has been
right.
adopted. And the clever players, the big boys, China and the others, are just biding their time, making alternative arrangements. And I think that the bond and all other markets are anticipating in whatever it is, 2.5 years' time, that there's going to be a bit of a rebound of this, a bit of a
Okay.
punishment is coming, a bit of a we'll get you back stuff. Okay, and so
Yeah.
that's why now why equities going up so much, I don't know. I was going to give you a longer answer, but okay, and long may it last, but I think what's happened in the equities markets, and I really, this is my lowest level of expertise. I think what's happened is that there are a whole lot of new valuation metrics. Okay. The good old days
Right.
when you took your turnover, worked out your net margin, and you took a multiple to that, and that was the value of the stock, are long ago gone. The income statements today focus far more on the prospect of revenue growth and mass take on, such as fintechs and IT and all of those fabulous new things, and things which don't make money while they're growing, but
Right.
grow like hell. You got that, Tim?
Right.
So we're
Yes, yes,
buying
yes.
we're buying pervasive technology at a price which has no fundamental root to explain it, because the prospect of getting a dividend in such a high growth stock is remote, distant. So
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
mean, I do think it's very encouraging to me that even though I agree with you that the kind of metrics are all mixed up, I get very cheered by the fact that stock markets are high, and not just because people are making more money. It's a counterbalance to the pessimism that people have in their ordinary lives. If you just pick up your phone and you read stuff, you will
Mm.
end up a depressed person at the moment. I just think that's broadly true.
Well,
Because there's a lot of things that around the world to make you upset, but the fact that stock markets are at record highs, to me it means there's actually quite a lot beneath all of that, beneath the news. There's quite a lot of people who are getting richer and doing things that are interesting, that are absorbing their lives, that are providing skills and services and products for the world, and we're all getting a little bit richer, which is also you can
that's
see
where I
that in
want
all
to
kinds of
pause.
statistics. Yeah.
That's where
Okay.
I want to stop you. Okay. First of all,
Okay.
champagne can also temporarily relieve pain. but it's a deferral, not a relief. It's not a cure.
Yes.
Okay, that's the first thing. And the second thing is, we're all feeling a little bit better is vastly more inclusive than the subject matter is. Okay, the people that are benefiting directly from improved valuations of stocks are a tiny, tiny, tiny proportion of the world's population, my friend. I would argue an increasing, because I don't know that spend is going back into all of the things which affect broad-based participation in the economy.
But I mean, aren't stock markets really a function of the retirement funds? You could say that the people who are investing in individual stocks, like a small group, right? But people who have a kind of indirect benefit from the stock market, that number is very large. I mean, it's half the population.
Yeah, let me say it again. I wish you'd warned me that this was a quiz show this morning. Okay, because because here's the thing, Tim. I have never given advice on the stock market to anyone. Do you know why?
Right.
I'll give you
why.
Because I don't know. Okay, I really don't know. Okay, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure that most asset managers don't rely on a convergence of opinion generally as a foundation, and then some lucky guesses. But I'm going to get into trouble for this. Okay, so
yes, you are.
I don't really know, but I think to extrapolate the performance of the New York Stock Exchange or NVIDIA or whomever it might be going a little further than the general disposable income discussion at the lower levels of broader society, which I would argue are more than 50% of the world population.
Right.
So I think, if anything, the gap widens.
Right. Oh, well, maybe that's true. Okay.
Well, I just want to try to stop you asking me questions because, Tim, I don't know. Okay, stop it now. Okay, there's so many people that thought I knew about this stuff and you've blown that out of the water. Okay.
Oh, dear. Maybe we should move on to something that we know, that something else that we don't know about.
Yeah. I mean, I've been watching with some pity and horror at this Texas flood thing. And it's interesting because what happened is that the place where it happened is filled with sort of ravines and cliffs and things of that nature. So you had these funnels of water, which took the average height of the water from, and I'm sorry, it's in feet, from 0.7 feet, so call it nothing, to 23.4 feet in height, the height of the water, okay? Went from nothing to whatever it is, 6 or 7 yards high, okay? All that took place in less than 4 hours. And so it's very difficult to cope with that. And, it just points to our little fragility in terms of the bigger global forces. And it brings to our attention things like global warming and all of those other things, which we tend to think are next person's problems. It's a terrible thing. 70 people so far are either dead or missing, and so I hope they find them, and I hope they find solutions. It's horrible.
Yeah.
We in South Africa, I think.
I was just going to make. I was probably going to make exactly the same point as you, that we are spared a lot of these natural disasters. Although, by the way, people, if you've come from KZN as I do, you will know that the Tugela can rise 5 meters in an hour. I mean, there are places in KZN where you can really get caught on the side of the river very suddenly on a very nice day, and the water will rise extremely fast.
Well, to go back to sort of world affairs, I see that Trump's latest, first of all, the Trump-Musk battle, which was entirely foreseeable. I'm sorry, it was obvious. It was coming that, two forces collide, and as they say about elephants, the Earth just gets flattened a bit. But I think Musk's going to lose on this thing, okay? And because I think, he's now budgeted $250 million or something to launch the America Party, which is quite an original name, I must say. And he's sort of in defiance of power. Now, there's a very interesting debate between money and power, in my view, just generally speaking. So money can buy you so much power, but only so much. You can't change laws with money, although you could probably influence and do all sorts of things in the wrong places. But what do you think? It's not going to end well, Tim, eh?
No, I think it is going to end well. I think it's a great thing that Musk is doing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. And I think Musk is going to win. And I'll tell you why.
Right.
Because because actually there's a
Because he's a South African, he's one of us. Go Burki, go.
Yeah.
What? I don't know. Tell me why he's going to win. Okay, yeah.
No, because the difference between politicians and non-politicians is that Trump has some substantial but not huge businesses behind him. But essentially, at the moment, he's a politician, and his term is going to end in 3.5 years, right?
That's the point.
But, Musk is kind of young enough, and he has just enormous amounts of money, more money than is really conceivable. And he is very focused on achieving very specific goals, and he's very good at that, and he sticks with it. And when he has a problem, his approach to the problem, for all his other sins, the one thing that Musk does is he is just indefatigable. Did I pronounce that correctly? I'm not sure.
No, I don't even understand it. I was hoping you'd mispronounced it because it's not in my vocabulary. So say it again slowly. Yeah.
He is just unstoppable.
Unstoppable. There we go. Back to the normal people's
back
language.
to the easy words.
Carry on. You journalists make up words every day. I swear you do. Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing too, because I think he does have a fundamental argument here. And the argument that he stands behind is old republicanism. Personally, I have differences. I have different feelings and senses about things and situations and politics, and I change my mind all the time. But the one thing that I really appreciate about old style republicanism was that it envisaged a situation in which the state wasn't the overwhelming force in people's lives. And that the state should be a modest entity, and I like that idea. I'm sorry, and I think and I think that a lot of people do.
You might even say it's Ayn Randian in a bit, in some sort of way. But let's not bring other people into the argument. I do. But let me say this, and maybe it's a question of who outlasts whom, because of course,
right.
Trump's got a lot of money, but he's not bigger than USA Inc. Let's just keep ourselves sober here. And there can be damage done, and sometimes people who have to bear short-term damage are not prepared to put up with it for that much time while other people are having a nice fight. Let me say this: I think their union was fundamentally flawed. And so their breakup is going to have consequences. That would be how I summarize what I'm observing. It's going to make for fascinating TV and all that sort of stuff. And, they're both a little bit crazy. Eh? Not that I have a problem with that. It runs deep in my, in my DNA. Anyway, let's see. We'll watch. We'll watch from the side. I tell you what, South Africa, in so many respects, in my view, on these world sort of debates and fights and things, is happily on the sideline in the umpire seat. We're not directly having the fight, and I think that might be a good place to be for the next 3 years or so. Although we are
sort of being dragged into it a bit because of the BRICS battle. The BRICS summit, one of the BRICS summits is happening at the moment, and President Ramaphosa is there, and it sort of does put us into a camp. Yeah, the more this BRICS thing happens, the more I wonder whether it's a sensible move for South Africa. I don't know. It seems so good. It seemed like such a great idea. What do you think? You think we should be part of it?
Yeah. As someone once famously said, I would never join a club who accepted me as a member. I forget who that was. but it is it's becoming an increasingly strange club, with Russia and China and India and us and Brazil and so on in it. So I don't know. I wonder at the consequence of any of these world gatherings. Ultimately, I wonder whether they ever get beyond the agenda into action and whether it really counts, because they go back to their constituencies and they've got more urgent and more direct wars to fight. We're not without our trouble, Tim? I mean, I watched in some interest with the police general in the KZN accusing the minister of all kinds of wrongdoing, and you have to take the view, I imagine, that he can't be making this thing up. Okay, because he's not higher ranking than the minister. He's not even higher ranking than the chief of police. And so he is sticking his head out as a very senior general and making accusations above in the hierarchy. And you wouldn't do that for fun, right? Because the consequence if you're wrong is going to be end for you.
Yes. No,
What do you
it's,
think of it all?
it's the Game of Thrones kind of like situation. You know that old saying that treason never prospers, because if it does, it wasn't treason.
Yeah, I'm going to use that. Yeah, okay. No, I think beyond that specific instance, I am
Right.
getting the sense that more and more people that were previously quietened are standing up.
Yes,
And
no, exactly.
that's got to be a good thing. That, this is generally, as people stand up and say, listen, what happened with the Zondo Commission? What happened with this? What happened? Nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. And they embolden one another. And eventually, to go back to where we started this morning, the truth will out. And I live by that axiom. I really believe in whatever form it manifests, the truth finally emerges, because it's the only stable thing in the universe is truth.
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm encouraged by these things. What I'd like to see is that the power that uses this as an opportunity to fix things rather than further damage them, if you will, if that's not too blunt a division. I mean, there now talks about what's going to happen to John Steenhuisen as a result of his utterances, whether you support them or not. And so we have power plays versus telling the truth versus economic issue. We've got a bit of a porridge here. Let's hope we can make it tasty. We have. Well, Tim, I think that's all I've got for this week, my friend. Hey?
No, for sure. Amen to all of that. Thanks everyone for listening to us again. Please do send us comments, criticism, presents. You could send
send presents.
Send verbal presents.
No,
all right.
Look after yourselves.
We'll see you again.
Cheers, man.
Cheers, man.
Bye.